This is Eva, one of the planning committee members, and I will be introducing the next presentation, which is about teaching digital accessibility in the digital humanities, some semi-successful approaches by Elliott Stevens, who is an English Studies and Research Commons librarian at the University of Washington, Seattle. So whenever you're ready, Elliott.
All right, great. Let me just share my screen. Everything's working okay?
Yep,
Excellent.
everything's good.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Eva. And as Eva said, my name is Elliott Stevens. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an English Studies and Research Commons librarian at the University of Washington, Seattle. I'm a white man with black glasses and a little black and gray beard. And a big thank you to the Ontario Council of University Libraries for organizing this amazing event. So today I'm going to be talking about, as a librarian at the University of Washington, I do quite a bit of teaching from quarter to quarter, and a lot of my teaching is in the digital humanities, and a lot of my teaching has to do with digital accessibility. And really, digital accessibility is a pretty new thing for me. There is no mention of digital accessibility in my job description, and it's something that really I knew nothing about when I started at the University of Washington 8 years ago. And that being said, it's now something that I think about every day without a doubt, and it's something that I work with every week. I teach between 5 to 15 sessions of instruction each quarter, and in nearly all of them, I touch on digital accessibility in some way. And I think I succeed in some ways and fail in others. And so this presentation is going to be a bit about successes that I think I've had in teaching digital accessibility, as well as failures or things that maybe need improvement. So I have a bit of an abstract in my slides. And so the first approach that I'm going to be talking about has to do with making a digital book that's about, to make a digital book that is about making accessible digital books. And so I'm going to get out of my sharing for just a bit to show some web pages. And at the University of Washington, one tool that we have on our menu of digital platforms is the Manifold publishing platform. So right now I'm on the Manifold publishing homepage. There's this big banner at the top of their homepage that shows their logo. Their logo looks kind of like an MC Escher Infinite kind of kind of thing. And so this is the Manifold homepage, and they often a free open source platform for people to make digital books. And I can show you an example. This is at the University of Washington. This is what our Manifold instance looks like. So we have this banner at the top of our homepage. There's a nice picture of the University of Washington Seattle Quad with some cherry trees in bloom. And then as we scroll down a little bit, there are these versions, images of little books, of all kinds of digital books that have been made with the Manifold publishing platform. And at the University of Washington, we have a UW Press. And so the UW Press uses Manifold to make digital versions of their books. At the University of Washington, there are also professors who use Manifold to make textbooks for their classes, to make free and affordable open textbooks for their students. And then also in some classes, the students themselves, either for assignments or sometimes for big culminating projects, the students use Manifold to make digital books. And Manifold does have some accessibility documentation. So I'm back on a Manifold web page. This web page is really just headings and lots of text. There's a lot of information in this web page. And this documentation is okay. It's pretty good. It does talk a little bit about Manifold accessibility. It talks a little bit about some shortcomings that Manifold has in the context of WCAG 2.1 AA. So WCAG, of course, are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So for example, Manifold does have something here where they say their annotation feature is not accessible. And so if you're someone who is using NVDA, who is using JAWS, you're using assistive technology, you are trying to read a Manifold book, you are not going to be able to access the annotations in Manifold. So at least they talk about that. And they also do mention here that if you're using the built-in media player in Manifold, that is not accessible. And so if you want to have an accessible media player in Manifold, you need to make sure that you're using something like YouTube or Vimeo and you are embedding that player into your Manifold book. So there's a little bit in here about how Manifold is accessible, how Manifold is not accessible. But one thing that I always found frustrating about this page is that it doesn't really tell you how to make an accessible book. Even if the platform itself is super accessible, there might be little things that you as an author could do to enhance that accessibility or maybe even to ruin that accessibility. So a project that I started working on, mainly because I was noticing Manifold was being used so much by teachers, by students, for assignments, for projects, I started to work on my own Manifold book about how to make an accessible Manifold book. And so right now I'm on the home page of my Manifold book. It's called Manifold Key Concepts for Accessibility. When you're first on the book, there's a big banner, and in the banner, there's an image of the Space Needle in Seattle. And as we scroll down a little bit on the homepage of my book, there are chapters in the book. And so one chapter has to do with headings, how to make accessible headings in Manifold. And it's a little bit tricky to make accessible headings in Manifold. Manifold works in that as a platform, you are always bringing something into it. So you are bringing a Google Doc into Manifold, you are bringing a Word document into Manifold, you are bringing an EPUB into Manifold. And what Manifold doesn't really tell you in their accessibility documentation is that you need to prepare your Google Doc in a certain way for the headings to transfer over. You need to prepare your Word document in a certain way for alt text, for example, in order for that alt text to transfer over. So that's something that I worked on here is I have a chapter about headings where I describe, if you are bringing a Google Doc into Manifold, this is how you can make it accessible. I have a chapter about alt text for images. And so right now I am looking at the chapter in my Manifold book, alt text for images. It's mostly text, but there are some screenshots in my chapter that show how to add alt text for Word, how to add alt text for Google Docs, and then how to bring that into Manifold. So this was one approach that I took for teaching accessibility in the digital humanities. And going back to my slides here, I would say that a plus here, a success here, is that at least I have made specific accessibility documentation that now exists. At least there's something for someone to consult. It didn't exist before. I would say a failure or a drawback or a minus is that now I need to make sure that I'm constantly updating and keeping up with my documentation. Since I've made my Manifold book, Manifold has released some updates, and now there are some things um, that I need to revise about my Manifold book. So right now, if you're looking at my book, it's not horribly out of date, but there are definitely some things that are not helpful in my book. So that is not a good thing. Another approach that I would like to talk about right now is leading discussions in classes about WCAG, about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Um, So at the University of Washington, there is a department that I work with quite a bit, and they are called the Comparative History of Ideas, or CHID. And in CHID, the students have to work on a culminating project in order to graduate. They work on a big thesis. And so this could be a long thesis paper, or it could be a manifesto. The students could do an art project. CHID is very open, very permissive in terms of what these culminating projects can be. So there are students who they've put on a dance performance, or they've done a fashion show, or they've started a novel, or they've made a film, or they've made a website, or they've made a digital book, they've made a digital exhibit. These students do all kinds of different things. And so the students are definitely working on websites, digital books sometimes for these projects. And the teachers in this department, they care a lot about digital accessibility. Um, um, and I would also say the students care a lot about digital accessibility. Some of the students who are CHID majors I've often found that we have a minor at the University of Washington in disability studies. And so sometimes the CHID majors are also disability studies minors. And these students know a lot about accessibility in general. They know about universal design, and they know a lot about digital accessibility. And so the teachers for CHID, they asked me to put together a session of instruction that would serve as an introduction to digital accessibility. And they especially wanted me to focus on WCAG, on Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And a lot of this, I think they wanted to have this session just because they noticed so many of their students were working on digital projects, or so many of their students were preparing documents like PDFs or Word documents or Google documents, that they wanted everybody to have a little bit of a background in digital accessibility in the WCAG context. And so something that I put together a lesson plan. And so this is right now I'm looking at my lesson plan. It's a Google Doc, and the Google Doc is mostly prompts for students and places for students to answer the prompts. I use this as a in class, students can verbally talk, or sometimes students prefer to write things down and engage with the document instead. So this is a document that has a lot of text on it, but also places for students to respond to the text. And in this session, I usually start off by just talking to the students. We all talk together. I don't necessarily see myself as an expert about accessibility, and I know a lot of the students in these classes are also disability studies minors, so they know a lot about accessibility. So usually we start off with just a conversation of what even is digital accessibility in the context of people with disabilities and assistive technology. So some students have a lot to say about this. Other students have a lot of questions about this. I ask the students what rules or laws or guidelines exist for digital website app accessibility. Especially in the past, the students wouldn't really mention WCAG at all, or things like the Americans with Disability Act Title II laws. Um, Mainly the students would just mention the ADA in general, but I've noticed now more and more in the last year or 2 years, students do mention WCAG or ADA Title II. Then what I have us do is we jump a little bit into looking at WCAG. The WCAG documentation definitely can be very intimidating, very technical. I definitely get lost in it. There's a lot about it that I do not understand at all. But right now I am looking at the WCAG homepage. And so there's just a giant table of contents here, tons and tons of text, tons and tons of links in the WCAG web pages. But what I have the students do in this session, I have them read the first couple paragraphs of the abstract. So we take a little bit of time to read the abstract of WCAG. And then we also take a little bit of time to read the first couple paragraphs of the background on WCAG 2. And then we talk a little bit about what they notice. There's a lot of interesting stuff in just the abstract and the background about WCAG does and what it does not do, how it thinks about accessibility, how it defines accessibility, how it engages with concepts of disability. It's really fascinating. And so I find that even though this is a very technical document, it's a very dense document. Um, the abstract and the background do lend themselves for some good discussion in class. So we talk about that a little bit. Then the next thing that I show the students is the No Mouse Challenge. And so the No Mouse Challenge is something that was developed at the University of Washington. Right now I'm looking at the homepage for the No Mouse Challenge, and the homepage has a lot of text in it, a lot of instructions about how to do the No Mouse Challenge. And basically with the No Mouse Challenge, what you do is you pick a website that you use. Um, and then you see how much of it you can navigate without using a mouse. And so you use tab to go forward, shift tab to go back. You can use arrow keys to try to navigate. You can click a space bar or the enter key, which should replicate like clicking with the mouse. If you get stuck, you should be able to click escape and get out of a space. And so I introduce students to the No Mouse Challenge, and then we pick websites and we navigate them with the No Mouse Challenge. And so we look at the University of Washington homepage, we look at the University of Washington Library homepage. Some students who are sports fans will look at ESPN, and they very quickly notice that they can't get anywhere in ESPN.com. It's a total disaster for the No Mouse Challenge. So that's something we do a little bit of. And then I just mention other ways to test things for digital accessibility. So this lesson plan is a lot about discussion. It's a lot about WCAG, and it gets a little bit into accessibility testing and like this the specifics of digital accessibility. Um, so I would say for this approach, a plus is that it's definitely active discussion. I would say another plus is that especially for students who know a lot about digital accessibility, it's a great way for them to talk, for them to share. I really believe in teaching and learning contexts. It is most exciting when the role of teacher and student when those roles are not fixed, everyone is a teacher, everyone is a student, everyone is sharing, everyone is engaging. So that's great. I would say a minus, though, a failure perhaps, is that it really doesn't get into the practicalities of digital accessibility. The students in CHID are making websites or they're making digital books, and we're not really talking about how to make sure their headings are accessible or how to put in alt text into maybe a Google site or how to put captions into their video or how to fix their captions in a YouTube video. We're not talking about those specifics. So I think that's a drawback of this session. The last approach that I would like to talk about is I call it teaching top things, teaching a top 7 things for digital accessibility. And at the University of Washington, another major, or no, this is a minor. Another minor that I work with quite a bit is the Textual Studies and Digital Humanities minor, TXTDS. And in TXTDS, those students, like the CHID students, they work a lot on digital projects. Some of them are making websites, and so they might be using Google Sites to do that, or WordPress. They might be making their own website from scratch, which with HTML and CSS, they might be using XML to do text encoding. Sometimes these students make digital exhibits with the Omeka platform. They make digital books with Manifold or with Pressbooks. And so these students are definitely working on digital projects. And I've noticed that as savvy as these students are in making their digital projects, a lot of them aren't so much thinking about digital accessibility. They're not thinking about digital accessibility from the beginning of their project in its planning stage. And then once they've made a project, and if their project does have accessibility problems, they don't really know how to fix those problems or how to remediate or revise, or to just think about a varied and diverse audience of people who will be accessing their digital projects. And so what I did for these students, I put together a handout that I call Top 7 Things for Digital Accessibility. So this is a Google Doc. There's a lot of text on this Google Doc, lots of links in this Google Doc. And this was inspired by the University of British Columbia's OER Accessibility Toolkit. They made an absolutely amazing resource for that. So a lot of this is inspired by that. And with digital accessibility, I feel like, again, I'm not really an expert here, but I feel like there are 100, 200, 1,000 things we could talk about when it comes to making a digital project accessible. I mean, look at WCAG 2.1 AA. There's a lot there. And so instead of thinking about 1,000 things, I decided let's focus on 7 things for digital accessibility. So one thing is do the no mouse challenge. Can your project work with the no mouse challenge? And then other things to think about for a project are headings, color contrast, alt text, link text, captions and transcripts. I notice lots of students are making videos or podcasts. They need to transcribe those things or testing different document types. I've noticed in the past, in particular, students make a lot of things with Canva, and a lot of the things they make with Canva, like infographics, end up being totally inaccessible. So these are the top 7 things that I came up with. And then I break down a little bit how these 7 things work or how to test for these 7 things. And so I've used this document in my teaching. Sometimes this is the focus of an hour session of teaching, or sometimes I use this in consulting one-on-one with students, or sometimes I am just sharing this with them in their online course in the online course management software. So we use Canvas. Sometimes I am sharing this in Canvas for students to think about as they're working on their projects. So those are the 3 approaches that I take. All of them kind of work, all of them kind of don't. Oh, I would say for this one, the plus is that this is very practical, very manageable. It's very easy for me to tell students there's 7 things to think about with your digital project, and here's how you work on those 7 things. I would say the minus or the failure is that seems to be a very reductive way to think about accessibility. Accessibility is not 7 things, or accessibility is not WCAG by itself. WCAG is great. I'm happy it exists as a guide, but that is not the beginning and the end when it comes to how users use things online or how they are on the internet. So I would say that's the failure there. So that's what I have. Thank you so much.
Hey, Elliot, thank you so much for your amazing presentation and showing us so many different tools and techniques when it comes to pushing accessibility forward. We do have one question, and We have time to answer that. So Charles Lapierre asked, do you recommend students to use Daisy's Word to EPUB, which can create a very accessible book if you use the accessibility checker inside Word and make proper headings, tables, etc.? It's a free add-on for the PC version of MS Word.
Well, Charles, um, it sounds like you definitely recommend it, and I'm not an expert in this stuff. I've encountered Daisy's products a little bit. Sometimes I've used Daisy's EPUB checker. I've mentioned that. I wasn't aware of this thing that it does, so that's really exciting. I'm happy I'm here to learn about this stuff because I think I will have to add that um, to something that I'd like to test out and something that I would like to recommend to others. But that sounds amazing. I have not used that, and I have not recommended it to people, but that sounds like exactly the kind of thing that CHID students need or TXTDS students need. So thank you for the recommendation. That's wonderful.
Yeah. We have another question, which is from Derek. Can you talk a bit more about what a consultation with a student would look like?
Yeah, for me in consultation, whenever a student is working on a digital project, I would say aside from accessibility, there are three things that I always have in my mind for a digital project. One is the student safety online, so checking in with them and making sure that they are protecting themselves online. I want to make sure that they are doing things because they want to do it or because they have consent. If a student were to tell me, oh, my professor is like, requiring that we are all on the public internet, that a red flag might go up in my head, or I might want to talk to the professor about requiring all students to be in the public internet for an assignment. So I sometimes think about digital safety. Is the student using their full name? Are they using a pseudonym? Are they anonymous? If a student is telling someone else's story, do they have that person's permission to tell their story? So that's important. I also think copyright is important. So when I'm looking at a student's project or talking to a student about the development of a project, I think a lot about copyright. Um, are they making their own things or are they using things that are under copyright? If they are using those things, is the context fair use? Do they know about Creative Commons? Do they know about public domain? And then aside from that, of course, digital accessibility. And so sometimes if someone is brand new to accessibility, like me, I really focus on those top seven things. So if they're using in on our menu at the University of Washington, I find that things like Pressbooks and WordPress are like the most accessible. So if a student is making a WordPress website or making a book with Pressbooks, I can point out to them accessibility features in those platforms and also make sure that they are enhancing those features by having good headings, good alt text, captioning things. Um, but then if they're using other things, other like Manifold, I would say is kind of in the middle. It's not horrible, but it's not great. And so if they want to use Manifold, then it's a little bit trickier. There might be things that I have to maybe warn them about, or if they're making a digital book with Manifold and they are really, really relying on annotations, I might have to let them know, hey, if you're really using a lot of annotations in Manifold, you're probably going to be you not probably you are you're going to be excluding a lot of your audience because they're not going to be able to access those annotations. Is that something you want to do? Or I have found that the platform Scalar has a lot of problems. So if someone wants to use Scalar, I find that I try to say, I don't think this is the best platform for you to use. Would you consider using Pressbooks instead or Manifold? So in general, in talking one-on-one with somebody, I try to think about digital safety, copyright, and accessibility. And I just try to figure out where they are at. Like where are they in terms of their journey of thinking about accessibility and employing digital accessibility in their projects?
Thank you. We have two more questions, and I noticed that we're almost out of time. So if you could answer those
Sure.
questions within the chat, that would be wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for
Mhm.
being so attentive, so thoughtful, these amazing questions. And thank you for this opportunity to speak a little bit about my teaching and my successes and failures with digital accessibility.